The great white shark is one of the most formidable creatures in today's ocean, armed with a jaw full of razor-sharp serrated teeth and capable of breaching out of the water at high speed to catch its prey. This is a lethal apex predator. On top of this, they're also considered the largest predatory fish in the sea. They're well known for attaining almost mythical sizes. Many can't quite fathom just how big they are until you see one up close. There seems to be a worldwide obsession with the size of great whites, particularly any individuals that rival or maybe exceed 20 feet in length compared with their official average size of 15 to 16 feet. I'm not quite sure why this obsession began. Fear, fascination, or maybe just the human nature of a thirst for knowledge. Over the years, though, many of the measurements for great whites have often been exaggerated, incorrectly measured, non-scientifically estimated, or just downright made up, which makes it pretty hard to decipher the fact from the fiction. But according to science, how big do these sharks really get? If you were to watch a lot of other YouTube videos centering around this topic, you'd get a load of bogus measurements or numbers that have since been proven to be false. But today, in this video, you're going to get the actual science. The real ones, the ones that hold up to the test of scientific scrutiny. If you're a great white shark aficionado, you'll have likely heard of some of the more outrageous white shark measurements before. For example, we've got the Port Fairy white shark, caught in the 1870s in Australia, which was supposedly 36 feet long, or the New Brunswick shark, caught in the 1930s in Canada, that was 37 feet long, both of which somehow remain in the Guinness Book of World Records, by the way, for the largest white sharks ever recorded, despite them being scientifically proved as false. The first turned out to have serious errors in their measuring, and then the second ended up being a misidentified basking shark. There was also the Azores giant, who was reported to come in at 29 feet long. For years, the only photograph people had to go off was this one, and based on the perspective of the photo, it does look big. Okay, maybe not 29 feet big, but still, it could, from this particular image anyway, be well over 20 feet long. Years later though, more images would surface, found in an old Portuguese book showing that the shark was no way 29 feet, and it wasn't even close to 20 feet. These rarely seen pictures of the Azores giant show the shark coming in probably at around 16 feet long. This gives us somewhat of an appreciation of how perspective can be forced, especially from these old picture accounts. But there are some other slightly less outrageous ones that tend to circulate around the internet from time to time. The Cuba great white from the 1940s is clearly a big shark, reportedly 21 feet long. Taiwan's giant in 1997 was suggested to be just shy of 23 feet long, and then there's the Malta shark in 1987, who is estimated to be over 23 feet. Although these shark measurements seem significantly less ridiculous than the 29, 36, and 37 feet suggested earlier, they all still have something in common. They weren't truly reliably measured at the time of their capture. They remain as estimates, and loose estimates at that. Although rough estimates can on occasion be helpful, they can never be classified as scientifically accurate. There's a bunch of different reasons why the sharks from Taiwan, Cuba, and Malta were only estimates. Often there's no one there at the time who is trained in the accurate scientific measuring of large sharks, so people simply measure them in an unstandardized way. On other occasions, sometimes only photographs are taken of the animal, and people have tried to then use objects like boats or even other people in the photo to gauge the scale of the shark. As well as this, we scientists don't really help ourselves either, because there are so many different types of measurements that need to be taken, and sometimes people only take one of them. So what are those measurements that are taken when people are trying to measure a large shark? Straight off the bat, every form of length measurement is measured from the tip of the snout. Some of the more intricate ones include pre-orbital length, that's from the snout to the eye, or we've got the head length, that's from the snout to the last gill slit. But your three main ones are PCL, pre-caudal length, from the tip of the snout to the base of the caudal fin. FK, fork length, from the tip of the snout to the fork in the caudal fin. And TL, total length, from the tip of the snout to the tip of the upper lobe of the caudal fin. Now, this is the bit where we scientists like to make it all very confusing. You would imagine that the standard form of measurement for large sharks would be total length, right? Well, it turns out there's actually two different forms of measuring the total length. You've got TLN, which is the total length of the shark with its caudal fin in a natural position, and TOT, which is the total length of the shark with its caudal fin depressed, as in squished or flattened down. It's no wonder why there's so much discrepancy in the measurements of sharks all around the world, when some people end up using one form of measurement and not the other. Realistically, the safest thing to do with all these different measurements is literally to just do them all. But many of your everyday people who just happen to stumble upon a large dead white shark either don't know all the different measurements to take, or don't know how to accurately take them. And even on occasion, some scientists or specialists elected to just go for one of the measurements. It was all pretty erratic back in the day, but it's a lot better nowadays. So for the purpose of today's video, we're going to take a look at, in my opinion, the top 5 most reliably measured great white sharks. We'll look at the TOT measurement, that's the one with the fin depressed down, to try and eliminate any discrepancies. But you'll see that entirely removing all discrepancies is easier said than done. If you were after the TLN measurement, which is the fin in a natural position, that type of measurement can actually end up meaning the sharks are a foot or more shorter than they would be if the fin was depressed. So that's something to consider. Coming in at number 5 then, we've got the Sète shark from France. Caught in 1956 off the coast of Sète, a major port city in the southeast of France, this particular shark comes in at 5.83 TOT. 19.1 feet long. It's often referred to as the longest white shark whose length can't be questioned because we've got a full set of morphometric measurements taken by a specialist at the time of its capture, but also because we have a fully intact cast of the shark that sits on display in a museum in Lausanne, Switzerland. The cast itself features the original fins and teeth from the shark, which is pretty cool, and this is probably one of the most accurately measured white sharks we have to date. If you Google the Sète shark, you'll see the TOT length is reported as 5.89 meters, which was the length reported by the fishermen when they caught it. But based on the measurements from the complete cast in Lausanne, it comes in officially at 5.83 TOT. It's kind of tough to get an appreciation of the true size of the shark cast from this picture, but if we have a look at this one here, this is the shark in the museum on display. You can see the people below it, and we've got this handy to scale grid here of the length in feet as well. We've also got an interesting picture here comparing the size of Deep Blue on the left from that clip with Hoyas Padilla and the Sète shark here on the right. It's not perfect, but it does give you a comparison of what a human looks like close to a shark that's around 19 feet in length, which does somewhat add some perspective to the true size of Deep Blue, who's perhaps fairly similar to the Sète shark. Next up on the list, coming in at number 4, is the Gulf of Gabez shark. This pregnant female shark was caught just off the coast of Tunisia in 2004. She officially comes in at 5.87 meters TOT. That's 19.2 feet. We only have one photograph of this female, so not much to go off, but she was measured by a specialist at the time of her capture. Although based on the written account given in the scientific paper, they were only able to take a few measurements at the time. And this was because the adult female was quickly cut up by the fishermen who had caught her because they wanted to sell the meat. So the scientist in question only had a really short period of time to get those measurements in. Interestingly, for this one, we can see she was caught almost exactly where I drew that little circle in the Where Are All the Mediterranean White Sharks video that I did a few months back. Make sure you check out that video in the top right, by the way, if you want to learn where all the Mediterranean white sharks are hanging out. The Gulf of Gabez is not far away from the Sicilian Channel and the island of Lampedusa, where those videos of big white sharks have been filmed swimming around. This pregnant female caught in 2004, though, had a number of decent-sized embryos inside her when she was dissected. So we can see off the coast of Tunisia, towards the Sicilian Channel, you're gonna get some big adult female white sharks. This wasn't that long ago as well in the grand scheme of things. Of all the sharks that we're gonna talk about today, this one was the closest to now, having been caught back in 2004, so 20 years ago. Okay, at number 3 then, we've got the Prince Edward Island, or PEI white shark. The PEI white shark was caught in eastern Canada, not too far from Nova Scotia and New Brunswick. We know that white sharks do move up into these waters at certain times of the year, generally the summer, before then heading back down the coast again in autumn when it starts to get a bit too cold. This female shark was caught by David McKendrick in 1983 and was measured by a shark specialist at the time of its capture. Although here we get our first discrepancy. This shark only had its fork length measured. Remember, that's the measurement from the snout to the fork in the caudal fin. But based on other measurements taken from other sharks that include fork lengths and their total lengths, we can extrapolate the PEI shark's fork length measurement to give us an estimated total length. And that comes in at 5.96 meters TOT, 19.5 feet. Looking at the photos, it doesn't quite look as big as that, but as we know, photos can easily be deceptive in terms of estimating the size of large sharks like this. In reality, what we have here is likely one of, if not the longest fork length measurement ever recorded for a white shark. Fork length is quite a good measurement to have because you can't stretch that measurement like you would be able to do if you were depressing the caudal fin down. Okay then, coming up to our biggest sharks, at number 2, we've got the Ledge Point white shark. The Ledge Point white shark was caught in in 1987 off Western Australia. We have to note here, this particular shark wasn't measured by a specialist at the time, but the measurements taken by Peter Archer were recognised and accepted by John Randall, who is most definitely a specialist in large white sharks. Randall got in touch with the person who owned the jaws of the ledge point shark to try and verify the measurements, with the jaw being one of the largest ever recorded. So based on the measurements taken by Peter Archer at the time, Randall's jaw measurements and photographic analysis, the ledge point white shark measures at 5.97 meters TOT. 19.6 feet. Looking at some of the photos, the shark does look a little bit thin in terms of its girth, but it does look quite long. We can see the caudal fin does look pretty big here, and based on this set of jaws, it's undoubtedly a big shark. But again, it's maybe worth questioning the lack of a specialist taking the measurements at the time. So finally then, coming in at number 1, we've got the East China Sea white shark. There are definitely some discrepancies for this particular individual because it wasn't measured by a specialist, nor do we have any photos of the shark itself. Despite this, it is listed in the scientific literature as the largest, most accurately measured white shark in this region of the world. Nestled between China and Japan, the East China Sea and surrounding waters of the Northwest Pacific have seen some incredibly large white sharks down the years. Some of them that have not been measured have instead been weighed, and the numbers come out at some of the heaviest in the world. The person who measured the East China Sea shark was a fish factory owner, and he was sent clear instructions by a shark specialist as to exactly how to measure the shark in question. So the fish factory owner was essentially following a guidebook on how to accurately measure large sharks. And those measurements came out at a very impressive 6.02 meters TOT, around 19.8 feet. But without photo evidence and a specialist measuring the individual itself, it's a tough one. I think if we were really scrutinizing it, we might default back to the ledge point white shark as the biggest one, but even that one has its caveats. I'm not quite sure what to think on this one, so make sure you guys let me know what you think in the comments. You can see though, a lot of these sharks that we've looked at today are coming in at very similar lengths. They're all pretty much just shy of 20 feet. And it just shows you, based on the somewhat reliable measures we have, there really aren't that many scientifically accurate cases of white sharks measuring over 20 feet in length. There are lots of claims and lots of apparent photos taken of these huge, monstrous sized white sharks, but they're often taken from strange angles that can, on occasion, create forced perspectives. When the specialists do some digging and verify further information from these cases, the sharks tend to shrink back down once again to below 20 feet. And that's not even taking into account the whole caudal fin in a natural position as well. All of the lengths that we've spoken about today have been the depressed caudal fin length, but when you take into account the natural fin length, you probably end up losing at least another foot of that length. As to whether there are truly 20 feet plus white sharks swimming around out there in today's oceans, I'd say on all balance of probability, yes, there could be. Lots of these white sharks that we've featured today have been very, very close to that 20-foot mark, so there's a chance. We're just yet to have one of that size that's been reliably and accurately measured by shark specialists. But also, looking at that probability, you've got to take into account some of the dates for these sharks. 1956, 1983, 1984. We're looking at 40 to 70 years ago there. That's a huge span of time. We do have the Gulf of Gabez shark in 2004, but it's still 20 years ago. There's a decent chance that there aren't many of these huge great white sharks out there anymore. At least not in the numbers that we were seeing 50 years ago. Sadly, it looks like the vast majority of these massive breeding females have met their end by fishing net or hook and reel. So guys, what do you make of all these white shark sizes then? Are you a firm believer there are bigger sharks out there? I want to hear all your thoughts in the comments below. I'd like to say a big thank you to Scott Merzwack, who's provided me with some extra information and images of some of the sharks that we've spoken about today. If you enjoyed this video, please do give it a like. But before you click away, if you're interested in some more content about great white shark sizes, then you might like this video right here. In it, I take a look at Deep Blue the shark, who's regularly been reported as being the largest white shark ever. But is she really? Well, in this video, with the help of some shark measuring specialists, I find out how big she truly is. So if you want to know as well, make sure you check it out here.